The second thing I want to tell you, beyond just, troubleshooting, starts with understanding, the primary sources of your baby's cries, and then even kind of organizing your life and adopting a lifestyle that's conducive to uh, meeting those basic needs so that they're not crying for those reasons, at least, those basic reasons. The next thing I want to tell you about how you meet those basic needs is how to know the cues, to know the hunger cues, the gassy cues, and the tired slash fatigued slash sleepy cues. There's also cues for things like babies just, let's say they have more wake time and they're playing, or an adult is trying to entertain them and they just need a change of scenery, change of pace. They want a different activity. They want to look elsewhere. There's cues for that are more or less obvious. There's cues about whether they're hot or cold, but I think those are going to be relatively more obvious to most people. They know the circumstances they're in. If you're in the middle of a blizzard or a snowstorm, please make sure the baby's not cold, right? Make sure he's warm. And if you're in the middle of the desert in the dead of summer, my God, get inside of some air conditioning, right? But hunger cues, burpy, gassy cues, and tired slash sleepy slash fatigue cues. I think I have some useful things to tell you guys. So let's start with the hunger cues. Four things, if you ask me. First is what everyone will refer to as a classic rooting gesture or rooting activity. Rooting meaning the newborn is rooting around with its head and mouth, looking for food, essentially just stretching and yearning for food, looking for the breast, looking to nurse. The tongue may be curled to the side, according to some folks. I don't know if I necessarily saw that in my son, but that's possible. But they may crane their neck, they may arch their back, turn the head from side to side, and they're rooting. They're just looking for the breast, looking for the bottle, looking for food. The next cue for hunger could be hands or fist to mouth, but not to suck. Because sucking is a primary self-soothing reflex or tool in the newborn's toolbox for how to self-soothe. So you don't want to mistake it for that, but if you know your baby, you have some eye on the clock, you understand when the last feeding was, you're trying to follow some basic schedule to keep things organized in your house. That shouldn't be a problem. If they're putting their hands to the mouth, putting their fist in their mouth, it may mean that they're hungry. Here's an interesting one. You may hear and I think the next two are more subtle hunger cues, but they were very valuable for us because, in the first month when we were just hovering over this bassinet, talk about, helicopter parents. I mean, we're just like obsessed with this newborn. Is he breathing? How long has he been sleeping or whatever? Like I said earlier in this video, you often can catch the baby coming out of a nap. It's been an hour and a half. We expect him to wake up soon anyway. And sure enough, you might hear what some experts refer to as a slight cough-like sound in the back of the throat. And believe it or not, we perceive that and experience that with our son. Cough-like sound, or even just a slight small cough from the back of the throat. May not be the case for you, but I thought that was an interesting, very subtle hunger cue that suggested that even as this baby is still asleep and maybe working off the last few seconds or minutes of sleep that he needs, he's emerging from that sleep and he's hungry. And it's, the main reason why he's going to be waking up to begin with. And they wake up with appetites that are fierce, right? So, you start to hear a cough, a small little cough. You might be able to, get yourself ready and maybe catch the wave where you bring this baby to the breast right as he's coming out of his nap. Won't even hear crying. Baby will start feeding, especially once the breastfeeding is really taken and mom and baby are both comfortable. You get a good latch. Baby is just nursing away. And then all you got to think about for crying after that is the gassiness, burping, dirty diapers, and then eventually, or soon enough, fairly soon, in the fourth trimester, thinking about nap time. But look for that, and I wonder if that you'll hear something like that too, a small cough-like sound in the back of the throat. The fourth hunger cue that I want to share with you guys, and the second one that is rather subtle and is a leading, like that cough, it's a leading indicator. It's something that you can catch, like I keep saying, you can catch it before you hear the crying. Which again, with a feed-wake sleep cycle, that's going to be very difficult to do because the crying will pretty quickly follow in close order from the nap, because they'll just wake up and they're hungry. You know what I mean? But the fourth cue is smacking or licking the lips. We got that a lot. Our son you would hear smacking of the lips. He's like asleep, half asleep, but just smacking his lips because he's hungry, even as he's waking up from his sleep. And that's a less subtle than the cough, but it's still a subtle hunger cue that's a leading indicator. Get yourself ready. I mean, I would even dare say you could probably pick up the baby right then and there and maybe wake him up and put him to the breast, and it'll be feed time. But maybe not. Obviously it depends on the clock and how much time he's had to nap, and if you really do need to wake him up, or just let it ride. If you're there anyway, hovering above the bassinet, waiting to put him to the breast and start the feeding. If you're on top of it anyway, then you can wait. But it's a leading indicator, and I think it's more common than the cough, perhaps. But look for that smacking the lips. Even as he's sleeping, if it's been about an hour and a half, hour 45, 2 hours more, he's probably waking up and he's probably hungry. Gassiness cues. Here I have three for you to consider. The first is that the newborn baby will have the tongue curled upward, almost like a little lizard, but again, without sucking, because sometimes sucking on their own tongue in a way, curling their tongue and sucking on it, that's a self-soothing thing that they might do. It doesn't necessarily mean he's gassy. But I don't recall whether that was the case with our son, but most of these troubleshooting cues are taken from Tracy Hogg's book, Secrets of a Baby Whisperer, that I've talked about throughout this series, including the first video where I talk about all the books that we'd read in some detail. So I'll give her credit for that. This one, I don't remember whether we saw it in our son, but that's something you might look for. Obviously, the most helpful clue to gassiness that I can give you is the obvious one, which is it will occur while he or she is nursing or feeding, because that's when they're sucking in the air bubbles, which causes the gassiness or the need to burp in the first place. So that's the big obvious sign that it could be gassiness and the baby might need a burp. But beyond that, look for the tongue curled upward like a little lizard. Look for a grimacing and a scrunched up face. That could be a good sign, especially if you're nursing, right? Maybe a scrunched up body too. I think Ms. Hogg says that the bodies can go rigid, and we might have seen that, but I don't remember. But as far as body language, otherwise, look for squirming. Imagine you kind of have this gas, or shoot, maybe you need to fart or something. I mean, we squirm. That's what we do, right? So the baby's going to squirm. The legs and the knees might be pulled up to the chest, and I don't know, sometimes that might help them, pass gas that way, or, it just might signal to you that they need a burp. So look for those types of cues when it comes to gassiness and burping the baby. As far as tired or sleepy cues that a nap is looming and imminent, and you would be well served to wrap up whatever you're doing and get to your pre-nap routine so that this baby will go down without any fussing or crying and sleep like a baby. First cue is what I would call slow down. Dr. Weissbluth, and I'm sure other people refer to this, but I don't think anybody actually, kind of like categorizes it or identifies it as a cue, but it is. I mean, I think the first maybe most subtle sleep cue that you can look for in your newborn baby. Maybe not the first month because they're just constantly passing out, but as wake time begins to emerge, and it's a very minimal wake time of something like, 45 minutes to an hour and a half, perhaps in the second month, measured from the start of the breastfeeding, by the way, measured from the time they got up from the nap. Perhaps the most subtle cue, or the first cue that you'll see, is that there's a sudden slowdown in their activity. And they might get kind of a glassy, vacant look in their eyes. Whatever they were doing, they just kind of stop suddenly. And you can see there's just this wave of like fatigue hitting them. We got to understand that for a newborn baby, everything is kind of condensed. So a period of time, like for example, if I woke up at 6 a.m. this morning, and I'm, by midnight tonight, by 2 a.m., by 3 a.m., by 4 a.m., I don't know about you, but I mean, I would be ready for bed, and I would be pretty darn sleepy and maybe getting cranky and grumpy. Now imagine if I pulled an all-nighter, and how grumpy or cranky I might be the next day, or by mid-afternoon the following day, and I still hadn't slept. Everything is condensed for a newborn. So asking them to stay awake longer than seconds sometimes, but certainly minutes in these very early days would be like asking you to stay up for another number of hours. And if you can understand that, then you'll be more on top, and you'll get more out in front of these sleep cycles and help your baby achieve better naps. So look for slowdown, look for glassy, vacant looks in the eyes, what my wife and I will call a 1,000-mile stare, where they're just kind of looking past you, and they're just like, slowing down. You can tell. I mean, if you're observing and you're paying attention, spend enough time with your baby, you'll see those things. In order, kind of an ascending order of, early subtle leading indicators to more lagging indicators, turning the head away or side to side. If it's not nap time, it could just mean the baby wants to do something else. But if it's close to nap time, it might indicate fatigue and the need for the onset of sleep. Tugging the ears or the cheeks. We didn't necessarily see the cheeks, but I think we did see the ears, and that's not intuitive to me. I wouldn't have thought, why would that mean that the baby was ready for a nap? But consider it. Perhaps look for it in your baby, and look at the clock and see if it makes sense, because that could be an indicator, that some kind of a cue that he or she is giving off that he's getting sleepy and needs to nap. Rubbing the eyes, pretty good sign. I mentioned in the last video about sleep. Red eyes or bloodshot eyes, I would say, geez, I put this baby down. I'm not sure if we saw that in our son, but, that's a relatively clear sign, if you ask me. Yawns, I talked about yawns in the last video on the 4th trimester and sleeping through the night, but, in our experience, yawns were not a leading or lagging indicator. They were somewhere in the middle. And by the time we saw our first yawn, it was almost always, I would say, after the glassy eyes, after the slowdown, maybe after the 1,000-mile stare, but around there, you might get the first yawn. And as I said in the last video, that is a yellow light. It's not a leading indicator. It's somewhere in the middle. It says, you know what, you could probably put this baby down right now. But whatever you're doing, try to, make haste and, wrap it up and, prepare for your pre-nap routine and prepare for nap time. The second yawn was really kind of a red light. It's like, stop. And, it would be good if this baby went down right now if you don't want to hear any fussing or crying. And in our experience, if we waited for the third yawn, we would start to get fussiness and crying. And then you have to deploy other methods to try to soothe the baby, calm him down a little bit so that he can nap at that point. And the longer you wait and the louder and more desperate the crying gets, the more overtired and overstimulated this newborn baby gets, or even not so newborn baby, you're asking for it. Now it's like maybe they got to fall asleep in your arms. You can't put them down drowsy but awake unless you're willing to walk away and just let them, cry it out, which, by the way, is perfectly fine. I think we ought to kind of somewhat end the debate about whether, letting a baby cry to sleep, if that's all it is and everything else is totally hunky-dory, And, maybe we made the mistake of delaying the nap and now they're paying the price for it. Frankly, I think the best thing to do is just let them cry until they fall asleep, because that's really what they need. If, be my guest, and, by and large, I think in those cases, we actually had to, we soothed him to sleep. We didn't let our son cry it out. Not in the fourth trimester anyway. We certainly did in the month that followed, and I'll talk about that in future videos, but we didn't do it in the first 3 months, but we did have to soothe him and calm him down so that he would either fall asleep and then put him down, or just calm him down enough to soothe him down enough that he was calm, and then put him down drowsy but awake if we could. So, look at yawns as that kind of a tool, or that kind of an indicator to guide you. The next cue would be fussiness, arching of the back, maybe strong, uncoordinated kicking. You're getting very close to this baby starting to cry, and, think about it. He's obviously expressing something, that he's not happy, and he's not happy because, he needs to sleep, and maybe he's in an environment that, stimulating or whatever, or he's just not on his back and he's not in mommy's arms, or he's not in a scenario in which he can sleep, or maybe he's fighting the need to sleep. In any event, if you talk to, I'll say it again, if you talk to one of us after pulling an all-nighter, or God forbid going, starting to go a second night without sleep, things get kooky, right? I mean, it's things start to unravel pretty quickly with sleep deprivation. And again, asking a newborn baby to stay up another, 15 minutes even, beyond the time that they really, really need to be sleeping. They might pass out from exhaustion eventually, but you're going to hear a lot of crying along the way before then.